first part of your lecture, you helped us see God as a sovereign, as a monarch. Well, to those of us now here, your audience, who live in democratic America, that's a very foreign concept. And there will be other times in Jewish history and other places, other regimes, where it was easier for us to be in touch with monarchy. But that hierarchy and stratification socially is foreign to us. And we tend to put our emphasis more on the equality, which is also found in the Hebrew Bible. But I guess my question is, what do we lose when we forget about the hierarchy?
We've lost a lot. This year, is 2018, 2019, is the anniversary of the ending of the First World War. And one of the things that went away with the First World War was really most monarchies. Because before the First World War, everyone assumed in Europe that monarchy was the natural way of how a country should be run. You had the Kaiser, and you had the Tsar, and you had the Austro-Hungarian Empire. All that disappeared. So that now, our natural inclination is that that's crazy, the concept of kings. As I mentioned in one of my previous lecture series, the entire history of the way the West thinks about this is summed up in the Monty Python skit, where King Arthur says to a peasant, "I am your king." And the peasant says, "Well, I didn't vote for you." And Arthur explains that he's king because he took Excalibur. The Lady of the Lake held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water. That is why I am your king. And the peasant says, "Listen, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not some farcical aquatic ceremony." That's how we think today. And 2 points about this have to be made. The first is, even if we can't appreciate monarchy, we have to stop when we read this liturgy and appreciate what an extraordinarily subversive act and an extraordinarily courageous act it was for Jews living persecuted under these terrible totalitarian monarchies to stand up in Rosh Hashanah and say, these human kings are nothing. Their dynasties will one day be gone. But you, God, you last forever, and we, your people, we are forever. The courage that it takes to compose this liturgy and to say it. And it's precisely because of that that sometimes these liturgies were censored. So we have to put ourselves in the mindset of Jews who are saying this liturgy for generations. The second is that even today, the people we revere are the people who saw God's moral law and, at times, depending on who our heroes are, religious law, as the commands of a king. That's why they kept them. So recently they publicized the wonderful story of Roddy Edmonds, who was a Christian American GI who was asked by the Nazis in his POW camp to reveal the members of his unit who were Jews. And he stepped forward and he said, "We are all Jews here," and refused to give them up. And why did he do that? Why did he do that? His son in an interview said because he understood the moral law as just that, a law. A law. To us, we don't tend to think about being ruled at all. It's against our democratic mindset. There's the wonderful line in Chariots of Fire where Eric Little's father, who was a minister, is speaking to Eric Little's friend. And he says to him something like, in a Scottish accent, something like, "The kingdom of God is not a democracy," something like that. So he says, "So you're saying God is a dictator then?" He says, "Aye, but a divine benevolent dictator." That doesn't make it better for us in the modern mindset. When you think about it, the laws are laws because they are the command of God. And heroes at the greatest moments in our history, when it would have been so much easier to just say, no, this may be the right thing to do, but I'm not going to do it. It was the notion that these are commands that actually saw them through. That's the message.
So what are we missing when we don't have that command?
Which means that if we don't retain that notion, at least, then our lives are all the more hollow. Whether we are people like Roddy Edmonds or like the midwives in Egypt. Again, the concept of a human king, the concept of them defying a king who told them to murder slaves, the notion of defying that king is unthinkable. And it's only because we are told, "Vatirena hamiyaldot et ha'elokim," the midwives feared the one true king who commanded them not to do this. That's what has sustained the heroes throughout the generations. It's what we need to rediscover. The famous, to bring the intellectual level of our conversation back down several notches. The summary of the age in which we are and why this notion is so foreign to us can be seen in Ghostbusters. The original Ghostbusters, not the recent. Obviously. Does not need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. Where Bill Murray says to Sigourney Weaver, he says, I make it a rule never to date possessed women. And then he thinks it over and he says, it's really more of a guideline than a rule. So that's where we are. That's where we are. And that's what Rosh Hashanah calls from us. And the truth is, to link the first question and the second question, if this is just a wake-up call for modern or postmodern notions of the journey of self-discovery, then it's better to stay asleep. This is not, the modern version of Rosh Hashanah would feature a rabbi quoting, Polonius, this above all to thine own self be true. But as Justice Scalia pointed out, this is either very good or very bad advice depending on who you actually think you are. The truth is that this is not about being true to yourself, but being true to the divine commands of morality and of faith, rightly understood. That's a very unfashionable notion. But the truth is, Rosh Hashanah, in its theology, from beginning to end, from coronation to Akedah, to children to the sacrifice for children rather than for yourself, is a very unfashionable holiday. But actually rediscovering what's at its core is essential, I think, for our civilization.